Headlining today, Spain and Portugal may face Eurozone massive fines for failing to do enough to sort out their budgets and deficits. Right. David Cameron gives his swan song at 10 Downing Street before stepping aside for Theresa May to become Prime Minister on Wednesday. And more charges against Bahraini human rights defender Nabil Rajab, who's being tried over Twitter posts. We get reaction coming up from his son about all this. It's 5 p.m. Tuesday, the 12th of July, live from RTHQ, Moscow. It's Kevin Owen with you this hour. Updates and all those stories to come, but we're starting off with more on that awful story that's coming today from Puglia in southern Italy. Real bad news there. An update on a rail disaster this morning. 2 trains collided head-on in the Apulia region, killing at least 20 people and leaving dozens more wounded. That death toll's gone up throughout the morning. It happened around 11:30 this morning, local time there. Emergency crews still very much at the scene. They're trying to pull dozens of others out of the crumpled wreckage of those 2 trains. A small child earlier was among those to have been rescued. It's not known at this stage why those trains were travelling in opposite directions on what is a single-track line in that southern Puglia region. Earlier, Prime Minister Matteo Renzi called the tragedy a moment of tears for the Italian nation. Balancing the books is proving tough for Spain and Portugal, and it's about to get tougher too with the news out today because Eurozone finance ministers are planning to hit them with sanctions for not doing enough to correct their huge deficits.
There has been ineffective action. In other words, Spain and Portugal have not done enough to stay on the fiscal path. Step 2 is, does that require sanctions? And step 3 is, what is the next task? What's ahead? What do we expect from these countries in the coming period?
The deficits in both countries have been above the EU's limit of 3% of gross domestic product. Sanctions for that then could mean a fine of 0.2% of GDP, and if you work that out, it's about €2 billion for Spain, almost €4 million for Portugal. With more, here's Lizzie Phelan.
Perhaps unsurprisingly, very angry reaction from Spain, the finance minister calling the proposed sanctions sheer nonsense. But it's really unclear right now what form exactly these sanctions are going to take. We've seen some top EU officials indicating that the sanctions will be set at 0, so essentially they're only going to be a symbolic penalty, and this really is a sign that there's very little appetite across the bloc to punish Spain and Portugal amid concerns that such a move would be counterproductive. But the timing here is really crucial. Of course, this announcement comes less than a month after Britain voted to leave the EU. In the wake of that Brexit, we saw some reports that, in fact, on the contrary, Berlin and Paris may be pushing for a European superstate, more control in Brussels. This came after a memorandum was leaked in the Polish press. The authenticity of it still hasn't been confirmed. But this memorandum was reportedly the result of a meeting between the French and German foreign ministers, where they presented a document to top European diplomats, as I said, calling for more power to be concentrated in Brussels. But at the same time, there's fears that this very controversial decision to impose for the first time sanctions on member states could only stoke those anti-EU feelings further, causing more division in the bloc.
Get some thoughts on this news from Felix Moreira, trader and portfolio manager at RF Trading. Hi, sir. 2 things spring to mind here. That's saying that's what friends are for, and kick you when you're down. It's a funny way to go about it, isn't it? You fine a fellow European state. Yeah, you've got to abide by the rules, but you fine a fellow European state, even though they're not in very good health financially anyway. Both these countries have had a heck of a time of late, and now they're having huge bills to face for it too.
Well, it's been 9 years since the onset of the financial crisis, of the 2008 financial crisis, and for not 1 year in those 9 has the Spanish government, 2 different governments, being able to meet the European targets for deficit reduction. Not once. And I think the damage from that to our bond markets and to our credibility is much harsher than any damage that could come from a tiny symbolic sanction. But
So
yes,
punishment is the way forward, is it?
I don't think they have the guts in Europe right now, or the focus to impose anything more than symbolic sanctions. But again, this is 9 years have passed. Spanish debt to GDP has gone from 35% to over 100%. We are not in the same situation. We are in an emergency situation, and people are acting, especially in government, as if this is normal, as if they can go on not meeting their commitments and not keeping their promises forever. Obviously, that's not going to happen.
Just to get this straight, you think that the EU in Brussels there might not carry out these potential fines? We're saying working out possibly €2 billion for Spain, €400 million for Portugal. It's going to hurt both countries if that is passed through. You think it won't go that far?
No, they'll impose something, but just bear in mind for a second that Spain has deficits of over almost 50,000 million euros a year. So 2 billion euros is a drop in the bucket compared to what the debt that the government is already racking up. So it's more the symbolic slap on the wrist and the effect on credibility than the actual money amount. Yes, obviously it's not going to be very good for the image of the EU in Spain if it's seen as if our European overlords are punishing us. But our own government is punishing us much more by the debt that they're laying on our backs.
Yeah. And do you think other EU countries that don't meet these targets, this target of this deficit limit of 3% of GDP, are they going to face punishment, sanctions from Brussels as well?
No, of course not. We've seen exceptions made for France and for Germany every time they've had problems with the deficit. And it's only the smaller countries with less of a weight in the EU who make less of a contribution, who are seen as the unruly children that need to be pushed around and taken care of.
So it's not a fair, it's not a level playing field as you see it, not a level playing field?
Of course, it has never been. There's countries that contribute to the EU budget and there's countries that draw from the EU budget. And the ones that draw have always been seen as the ones that need to be watched over.
Thanks for your thoughts. Felix Marangela, COVID Trader and Portfolio Manager, RF Trading. Thanks for being live with us on RT International.
Thank you, Kevin.
Another story we're following, what's going on in the UK today. Of course, the UK, by Wednesday, will have a new Prime Minister after David Cameron tenders his resignation to the Queen tomorrow. It's 2 months earlier than expected, too, but the outgoing leader doesn't appear to be too upset. Listen to this.
So we'll have a new Prime Minister in that building behind me by Wednesday evening. Thank you very much.
Number 10 to Theresa May tomorrow. She'll become Prime Minister unopposed after her rivals dropped out of the Conservative Party leadership race. But her political tactics of late have left some sceptical, as Polly Boyker reports next from Westminster.
She'll be entering this door with bags of political experience. For the past 6 years, Theresa May has been in charge of the UK Home Office. But not everyone is happy about her rise to the top.
Want to congratulate Theresa May? Simply send an email to, well, anyone really. She'll see it.
Theresa May's investigatory powers bill has been nicknamed the Snoopers Charter. The draft law requires internet service providers and phone companies to record users' browsing data.
It will provide unparalleled openness and transparency about our investigatory powers.
Not according to privacy campaigners. Edward Snowden's called it the most intrusive surveillance bill in the West. And the list of controversial initiatives from Theresa May goes on. She also supported a £6 million government contract to train Saudi prison officers before David Cameron bowed to pressure from human rights groups and cancelled the deal. The soon-to-be Prime Minister reportedly wrongly deported up to 50,000 international students who are in the country legitimately when she initiated a crackdown on foreign applicants to universities. But it's often hard to tell exactly where May stands on key issues. Initially, Theresa May leaned towards the Remain campaign on Brexit, citing risks to jobs and security as key reasons for the UK to stay in the European Union. But when the Leave camp won, her message changed.
Brexit means Brexit, and we're going to make a success of it.
May is known for talking tough on immigration.
When immigration is too high, it's impossible to build a cohesive society.
But during her time as Home Secretary, net migration has surged to record levels. Some analysts suggest that the mixed signals are intentional.
That was part of her pragmatism. That was part of her keeping her cards to her chest. She has actually one leg in every camp.
So changing tack on key issues has proven to be a fruitful political exercise.
I'm delighted to have won so much support from my colleagues. I've won votes from Conservative MPs from across the party, from left and right, Leavers and Remainers, MPs from the length and breadth of the country.
Polly Boyko, RT, London.